Thank you, everybody, for joining today our sponsorship session here. So I'm really pleased to be part of the CollabDays Virtual Birmingham Summit 2021, and we have prepared some great content for you today here. And as an introduction, my name is Heitkamp, Product Management at NICE. So I will guide you a bit through the session. We will not focus entirely on our sponsor content, but give you really some great technical details. So, Mugove, a short introduction from your side.
Yes, thank you for having me. So I'm a software developer at NICE, and I'll be showing you the Graph API and how to build an application later on.
All right, so let's go on and talk a bit. First, I have a short introduction about NICE to give you a bit of a background, what we do and where we come from. So we are a software development company located in Germany. So we have our headquarters in Stuttgart, central Germany, and we sponsor a number of user summits in different parts. So we have also another office in the United States, and you see a bit here on this slide where our customers are distributed. So like right throughout the world in different parts. So we primarily do license business. So we are a software development company. We develop monitoring solutions for Microsoft 365, and that's what we really will talk today about. So and also the techniques we're going to be using behind that. Great. So when it comes to monitoring, we are in business since over 25 years now, as you can see from our history. And we've been starting from a database side, so we've been developing for DB2, Oracle, and other databases, the monitoring. So in the history, we integrated with the HP OpenView product, later the Microsoft product that now primarily integrate with Microsoft System Center. So this is the main integration point. But besides that integration point, we also integrate this Azure Monitor, and that is basically something all of you have. As long as you're using Microsoft 365, there's a high probability that you're also using a subscription in Azure. So that we can also bring data in there from Microsoft 365. So let me put out a use case here first. So the key use cases here are what if things fail, right? So we all know that during 2020, we had a couple of outages with Teams and other products in the Microsoft 365 space. So when then there's an outage, well, many things are affected, right? So like if you see this here, can't access Microsoft 365 services. So that actually means that some of your workforce really might be impacted. So and the idea is here to get a proactive alerting plus differentiate if it's a problem on the Microsoft side or if it's a problem on your side. So, and this is the first step. And the second, what we also do is like do performance analytics for the different services. Let's see how is your mail flow, how fast are mails delivered between different mailboxes and so on. So that is also a big chunk of what we are doing. So you might know the Twitter or the status of Microsoft 365. Obviously, you can go there, you can get the status, but it will not tell you if your users are affected. So if your users can work actually, or if they cannot work, you don't know. They might actually call you and say, well, I have a problem. And then you might take a guess if it's their VPN, you might ask if the internet working, but you later eventually find out it's a problem on the Microsoft side. If you would have direct insights into what on the Microsoft side is happening, then you have a much better way to deal with that caller that has a problem on his or her side. Right. So we're trying to answer that question, are my users affected? So that is really like the scope what we are talking about here. And for that, we came up with, we created a solution in the market. We have that now for 3 years up, and we have many customers that are using this. So, and this is on the marketplace, so on the Azure marketplace. So you can log into your Azure tenant. So also if you like to follow some of the exercises we are doing, feel free to open right now your browser and go to portal.office.com or office.microsoft.com and log in there with your credentials. And that is basically the way you can, if you have an administration capability, you actually can also go to the marketplace and just type nice Active 365 in there, and you will actually come up with this offer, and you can actually try it from there. So it's not something you need to go through a long process to put some prerequisites in place on your side. Everything will be actually happening within your tenant, within your subscription that you're using. All right, so let's look a bit into details what we do and what this will result in. So once that is all done, you will actually have the capability to do analytics on your Microsoft 365 end user performance and your end user experience that is monitored by the solution. So you can actually have insights into your SharePoint logon performance. So these are actually real users that they use, and the real users are running against your tenant. And this way, you cannot get this insight you would only get if you have a lot of robots doing that. So we basically have also this feature to do that automatically. Not only for SharePoint logon, we do file up and download. We do for SharePoint, we do measure how fast the site builds up, like IIS latencies, and those types of things are also measured. So there are different, we call them metrics, that measure the performance of the different services. For mail, we have the Exchange part. So, and even if you're coming from a hybrid place where you actually have still like an Exchange server, or I say still, many will have forever as the Exchange server because they're using it for mail routing, or have a hybrid deployment, as we call that. So even in that case, we can support you. There can be some monitoring on-prem that does monitor that and brings the data in. However, this is currently in the scope of System Center Operations Manager with the management pack, because this has agents sitting on the different servers as well. So it will bring everything into one environment with this guy. Right, so we also do Teams, Microsoft Teams, and we can talk a bit about that later. What do we monitor? How do we monitor actually Microsoft Teams? This all brings it together a holistic picture of how your Microsoft 365 performance is in your tenant. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a bit about the techniques. So, we'll actually get into more details while we go through the session. So, first we'll talk about Microsoft 365. So Microsoft 365 is on the left side, really like the services you're using, like Teams, SharePoint, and Exchange services. So you might use Yammer or lists and some of the other features. So it's basically all in that area. So, now what is the main part to access that? The main part to access this is via the Microsoft Graph, and the Graph infrastructure has an API, and this is called the Microsoft Graph API. So there are a couple of other APIs like the Azure Management API. So we also use them in this product, but we'll today focus here on the Microsoft Graph API, really to see and understand what is going on in there. So first, let's have a look on the other parts that are in here before we actually drill a bit into that part. So when we have this nice Active 365 monitor, actually, what does it do? So it will actually do an authentication request against the Microsoft 365 services and request a token. So and with this token, it can then authenticate against different services and do a couple of things like sending emails and uploading files, retrieving statistics, retrieving reports, and all of this information is basically brought into this collector. So this is, we call this collector, and we bring it in here. So, and it's right in here. And from there, we can actually bring it to a connector. So, and this connector is quite universal. So we call it the nice cloud connector. This is a service that is running on a VM, for example. And this VM can be anywhere. It can be basically in the cloud. It can be on your prem. Any hypervisor that can run this can basically host those two components here. So in this case, the nice cloud collector will actually link it into Azure again, into Azure Monitor. And a bit later, we'll talk about Azure Monitor in more detail and see what is actually Azure Monitor in this case, and how data can then be visualized in metrics and in logs, which are there. And that also then helps to build reports or give you also key performance data. On the other side, you can also connect this into your system center operations management. If you have as a performance marshal, like your monitoring platform, then the data will be also available. Great. So that is a bit now about the architecture, how the solution works, which is there on the marketplace. So remember, you can go to the marketplace and look right there for our solution and start to create process of the VM there. And then through the process, it will guide you all the way until you collect the statistics and the data is available. Great. So let's go a bit on and talk about some technical details we have available here. So the Microsoft 365 platform is basically all which we are talking about here. And the platform has, as a program interface, the Microsoft Graph. And here we have the REST-based Graph API, which can be used to build your, as it says, your custom experience here. You have web apps, you can build bots, you can device native things or daemon apps, workflows, and analytics apps. This is basically what you can build in here. And we focus today on building some part of an agent and talk you a bit through how the experience and the go-to is here to start developing something. But before that, I actually like to hand over to my colleague Mugove. So Mugove, whenever you're ready, take the lead and talk a bit about Microsoft Graph in the first place.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Christian. That was quite informative. Yes, so like you mentioned, the Graph API was developed by Microsoft as a service that allows developers to query services on Microsoft 365. So it's a REST-based API endpoint that you can connect to. And there's lots of information that you can retrieve. If you type in, for example, docs.microsoft.com/graph, that will take you to this web page, which just gives you a breakdown of what Graph API is, what services and features it contains. And then it also mentions the Graph Explorer. The Graph Explorer is a tool that they provide, which allows developers to query the endpoints that are available. So Graph API is a single endpoint that you can access, and to do so, you can just type in your browser developer.microsoft.com/graph, and then that will take you to the Graph Explorer, like you see here. And on the first thing that you would have to do is to log in with your tenant credentials if you want to test various services. So I've already logged in using our test account, which is there on the left. And Microsoft also provides a number of queries that you can use to actually try and test the endpoint. So the first thing to do is you log in, and the act of logging in creates a token, or you retrieve a token that you will have to use to access the other services, whether they be OneDrive or Exchange or Teams or SharePoint. Whatever service that you need, you'll need to use that access token. And I can just do a quick demo for you, just to show you how to retrieve it. It's quite simple. So on the left here, we've got our getting started, the favorites, which are like get my profile, get my photo, my mail. At the bottom, you've got OneDrive. You've got your team somewhere. The team should be there, right? At the bottom, I don't see it, but it should be there. Okay. So the first thing to do my profile. So if I just double click on it, it will load this page. And if we analyze, I have to sign in again. Just wait for it. So I need to sign in because I was signed in with a different account, and the token that it will give me should be different. Okay, so I'll just enter in my password. And this very act will retrieve the access token. Okay, and yeah, so I've retrieved the data from Microsoft Graph API about myself, my profile, which tells me my display name, my email address, my mobile phone number if I have one. Okay, and I can also view the access token, which was returned, and I can copy it there. And we can quickly view the access token using a tool called jwt.io. It's a web tool, and what it does is it extracts the information that we have from that token into a readable form, and we can already see that my token contains my user identifiable information such as my display name, my email address, etc. Okay, so back to the Graph Explorer. So whatever we can do in the Graph Explorer is a way allows us to test the endpoint, the graph endpoint, which is this URL or URI, and run queries against it. And we can supply information in the headers and also generate code, which we can then incorporate into a tool. And I'll show you how to do that. So it's really quite simple. We can actually click on code snippets, and then it will just generate some C# code or Java code, which we can then add into a simple tool. Okay, so this is one test of the Graph API. Another test is to access OneDrive. So there's this get method. If I click on it, it should load the graph endpoint, which connects to OneDrive. Now, I have a OneDrive account over here on my screen, which belongs to my test account. And in that OneDrive folder, I do have access to the files that I've put up or I've uploaded. So just waiting for it to connect. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an application that will upload a file using the code from Graph Explorer. And then we'll actually check the site to see, if the file has been uploaded successfully. So it's just taking a little bit of time.
Hey, Mugove, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Oh, cool. Actually, I hear you as well. Great. Wonderful. Actually, for the others on the call, I will just put some links into the chat, so in case you want to try those things. So,
yeah. So another tool that we use when testing the Graph API is a tool called Postman. It allows us to automate simulations of the Graph API. So, for example, so the first thing that one would have to do is to download Postman and then configure Postman or the environment. And Microsoft provides us with what they call collections and then an environment, which is just basically some JSON files that you import into your Postman tool. And then that will give you set of JSON or a pre-built methods that you can use to get content from Graph API, or to put resources on Graph API, to post or to delete items. So Postman is just a tool that we use to quickly test the Graph API and to make it easier to manage things like the tokens, because you don't want to be constantly retrieving that token and posting it. So there's this collections here, right, which you can just copy and then just go to File, Import, and then you can just import that from the link. If you just type it in there. Oops, that was wrong. I'll copy this. Right. Copy that, it will import it. And then, it will create a collection for you with all this content. And then you can also do the same for the environment. The environment is just like where you store your tenant ID, your usernames and passwords. If you're doing a login with, if you're using a password authentication. Right. So back to our OneDrive. Okay. So it wants me to sign in again. Right, so I'll sign in, and then it should allow us to connect to my OneDrive account, and then we can see the files that are there. Okay, so currently I don't have any files. I don't have any files. You can all see that. And when I use the Graph Explorer here so when I use the Graph Explorer to get the query, it returns. Okay, so I've got no data. So I've used this endpoint, the drive root children endpoint, to try and retrieve all the files in my drive, and I don't have any. So what we can do is we can use this post method here to actually create a folder. We'll create a folder, and then we'll go check to see if it's been created. So if I run the query, okay, so it's been created, and it gives me details in the response body of the file of the folder that's been created. So it's a new folder. If I go back to my OneDrive, I should hopefully have a folder appearing here somewhere. Just give this okay. All right, while we wait for this folder to appear, what I'll do is now show you some code. I've already shown you that it is possible for us to get snippets of some code from Graph Explorer that we can then incorporate into an application, and then use that to simplify our development process, and use it to do items like uploading files. So this program here will upload a simple PDF file to the OneDrive account that I have. And so if we go back, right, okay, just hang on. Okay, so back in the OneDrive folder, we can see that the Graph Explorer has managed to create that folder. Right, so it's just an empty folder that's been created, showing us that this query worked, and the code for that is available here. So you can have it in C# or Java. It will just generate it on the fly. My language of choice is C#. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually to create code to upload to our OneDrive. So I'll just delete this folder. Right. Okay, so I'll just delete that. Okay. Right, and then I'll just switch back to our OneDrive. Oh, before I start, actually, there are a few prerequisites. You need to first have a tenant credentials for this to work, and to create an application. So Graph API require, if you're going to create an application, it's advisable to first create a graph app or an application. Okay. So the first thing to do is to log into your tenant with an admin that has that gives you permissions to create an application or to register an application. So this is why I'm switching my accounts to my admin account. Yeah. So I've logged in with my admin account, and then I can go to Azure Active Directory. Right, so Azure Active Directory, and then app registrations. So I've already created an app, but I'll just show you what it contains, and then the information that we need to retrieve from this application that we then place into the code, because this application will contain things like the application ID or the client ID. It will also contain a secret. This secret is required for the application because there are two types of permissions. So application permissions and delegate permissions. So I'm going to click on the app that I previously created. So this is all in our tenant, this app. Okay. So I've got an application with a client ID, which is this 7415, etc. This long GUID. We've got our tenant ID, which we'll also need, right? Then there's also what they call redirect URLs. So what these do is when you create this application and you're developing a desktop or a mobile application, you need to manage the token. The only way you can manage a token is through a desktop or mobile app, and not through a web. Because with a web application, you are not given the access to the file system, right? So, which is why we're creating a desktop or a mobile application, and we place it. We do that in the redirect URL, specifying a link where once you log in and you generate a token, it will post that token to that endpoint, and then the application can retrieve this token and use that later on to query Graph API. Right, so what I've done here is I've created a mobile and desktop applications redirect URL with HTTPS localhost. The web endpoint will be good for a web application, but it doesn't allow us to manipulate the token. So, which is why I've chosen this mobile and desktop application. So once and then there's a client secret. So you generate your client secret, and then once you've taken that information, we'll now go into, you copy your client secret there, you copy it, right? You copy your client secret, and then you come to your application, and then over here, we'll just show you, like, I've added my tenant ID, the application ID, which is we found from the application, and then the account that I'm going to use for logging in, right? We mentioned that you need to manage your token. Right, so you need to manage your token. So we created a class called file cache, which just manages the token in a file. And we use the DLL that Microsoft supplies, right? Which is the MSAL DLL. Microsoft recommends using this MSAL DLL, which is the Microsoft Authentication Library, rather than the previous DLL, or which is now almost obsolete, or should I say, supports version 1 of Graph API. Microsoft's now on version 2, because that allows you to access not just Azure or Microsoft Graph, but business to client applications as well. While the previous ADL DLL, you'd use that to access your on-premises infrastructure. So if you need to access on-premise, then you would have to use that ADL, which is Active Directory Authentication Library. But now they recommend to use MCL. And then we use the cryptography, which is available, the DP API, to encrypt the token and to decrypt it. Okay. And then onto our program. So the first thing to do is to retrieve the tenant, the application ID, the username. And then we request an access token, right? Which will then use to connect to the Graph API. And then with that Graph, once we've retrieved the access token, we will then create a delegate to supply that access token to the endpoint. And then we connect to our Graph API endpoint. And then we upload this file, right? So I'm just going to run this application quickly. Right. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is I have to log in, so that because in this method, the get access token, I have to log in and supply my credentials. Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Mugove?
Yeah. Do you still have enough?
Yep. Well, let's do like 2 more minutes. Let's see if it uploads the file, and then I'll
okay.
Going to share some more details on
all right.
on the Azure portal.
Okay. All right, just being.
So you're using delegated authentication now, or using the application credential?
I'm using delegated. I'm using delegated authentication. I would have loved to use application, but I just need to show that you need to first acquire the token, and then. Okay, so the login now. So I'm going to log in with the test account. Yeah. Right. So we've logged in, authentication.
So just for everybody, like while we wait to give you a bit of a background, I could also talk a bit about this. So the use case we are doing here is basically to test the upload of a file and OneDrive, and I'll show about the performance it takes in a moment. So, but is it complete, Mugove?
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Super.
So yeah, it did upload, and it did generate an access token, which is there, right? And if I could actually copy this somehow, right? If I could, I hope that copied. You could actually come to this JWTIO tool, place it in there, and then decrypt it. We can see the access token. But yes, the file was uploaded. to my OneDrive. You can see there the file upload test PDF.
Okay.
It's been uploaded by the application.
Okay.
It's been uploaded.
I think we'll only got a couple of minutes left, Mugove.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Could you get my screen back up again, please? Perfect. So great. So we'll learn a bit about, it was quite technical, I have to admit, so about the Graph API Explorer and Postman, and we included Visual Studio as well. So like really crammed together in a few minutes, but feel free to go to graph.microsoft.com and try this out your own. Some of you might have followed this along, but I have a few slides to cover still. So we'll take this data, like when we uploaded the file, we measure basically the time from exactly what this has been done. And then we bring this data to the Azure Monitor. So, and the Azure Monitor has in the background a big data store which stores logs and metric data. So it's also called like log analytics. And this data then can be analyzed, visualized, and we can respond to integrate with that. So in our case, actually, we will actually analyze this with the metric part, and then we can also visualize this, or we could also create a monitoring solution where insights are then provided into the data. So let me actually quickly show you a bit this as well in the Azure portal. So open this right now. So we have the data from collecting performance on the Microsoft 365 ecosystems being now brought into the metrics data store. And we can actually pick, for example, now, let's take Teams. To understand a bit of the performance of Teams. And in this case, we actually, it's a quite complex algorithm and that works in the background. So we actually have created a chatbot or two chatbots that actually do chat with each other. So, and we can actually look at the performance of the chats that is occurring between the two bots. So which just gives us a quite good understanding of the performance overall. And we can look like, for example, 30 days on the back. You see, we started it here, and actually the chat performance in Teams is quite similar all over the time. So, but for example, if you would have a problem or really a performance degradation on the Microsoft infrastructure side, we could actually get an alert on that here as well. So there's another one which looks at the availability of Teams, and I expect we had just not really an outage because it would drop down to zero if the Teams wouldn't be available, but it gives you an insight, and you can also use that data for reporting across a certain interval. But let's look at this exactly the use case that Mugove earlier demonstrated. So we have a OneDrive and we uploading a file. So we measure the performance of how long it takes basically to upload the file on a specific interval. So it takes between 3,000 and 4,000 milliseconds. And in some areas we actually go beyond that and it takes longer. So in this case, we can see here how long it's been taking. So and user data for analytics. The same part is here for availability and many other metrics. So for example, for email, what you would be interested in would be like how long does it take to send an email from one side to another, or how long does it take for some of my users to log onto the mailbox. We can here, for example, apply the so-called what we do splitting, and we can split this on different tenants, or we can split it across different users to understand if this is a similar thing for all users of the different tenants. So that is also used by some of our service providers. We provide the software to give those details. Right. So perfect. So I think let me just stop with this demo because we are getting towards the end of the session. Perfect. So let's go down and see. Yeah, let's talk a bit about reporting, because a main use case why many decide for the solution is like they like to understand like what is actually our availability from a team for Microsoft Teams from an end user perspective, and this can only be exactly determined if you measure it. So because Microsoft doesn't disclose this, it has to do with the SLAs. So you can measure the service level agreements with Microsoft on your own with this methodology. So you can actually do that. And so we create a report. This is now created from the System Center suite where we have this reporting solution. So you can actually then understand where there was a problem. And if you see last time we had in September a major outage, and if you go back and search on that, you will find also the information on this outage on those days and was exactly reported during that time when the outage occurred. Also, the same applies to SLA reports, and this is one for SharePoint now, where you can take this data. All right, I think we're wrapping this up. I get an alert that only a very few minutes are left. So, and Mugove, any questions you have seen on the channel you should pick up, or?
Yes, there's a question as what is the experience with the graph and timings of the process steps? Is it minutes, hours for a step to complete?
Yes. So this interesting question, because we actually indeed have worked through a couple of things, because there is something we know as throttling, which occurs. In this case, you really want to make sure that you know you can work with the data you expect. So if you go in and ask, for example, user read all for your organization, and you have 100,000 users in your organization, then it will basically run like a very long time to get you all the users. And then basically you can bring this together in chunks to avoid this throttling, because the request to the Graph API is so expensive, it will basically throttle you. And this has to do with timings when you do a request, but you kind of hold off for a while, and then it is brought back. But also many of your applications, of your clients, use also underneath the Graph API. So it mimics quite similar behavior as your applications. However, it's kind of important that you use the developer kit that comes with the Graph API, because that has some pre-built mechanics or some functions in there which help you to work with the throttling. So I think that gives you some of the answers, but the thing you should keep in mind, the Graph API is provided as is. So there's no guarantee that something works at a certain time. And also it's at this point, it's like open to community support. You can actually ask Microsoft a question, but if it answers or not, there's no guarantee here. So there is a plan for Microsoft, or there are plans to provide like a more ISV version, but that's quite early. So, but yeah, if you want to have more information on the Graph API, feel free to keep going on the chat so we can answer there, because I think our time is up now. I get a note from Mark here. So I think with that, well done. And I thank you very much, everybody here. And Mark, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. That was a nice presentation there, guys. I couldn't resist that terrible joke. Thank you. No, that's a very good presentation. Thank you. Nice to be informative and not just a hard sales pitch. So they're always appreciated and bring nice value to the community as well. So and also thank you very much for sponsoring. We've answered the kind of questions that have come in. So I appreciate that.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.